I know what you're going to say. YouTube hates reloading content, and I told all of my viewers that I wasn't going to make any more reloading videos. But my email is constantly full of questions regarding reloading dangerous game ammunition. So even if this video gets demonetized, I don't care. I think this is an important topic. I started reloading 375 H&H back in about 1998 and moved up through the 416s, the 458s, the 470s, and finally the 500s as the years progressed and as I started saving enough money to actually hunt dangerous game. Because of the enormous powder charge in dangerous game ammunition, sometimes over 150 grains of powder, overpressure situations become inherently more dangerous to the shooter. Also, we're hunting dangerous game animals that might try to kill you, so reliability is also very important. For this reason, the goal for reloading dangerous game ammunition is safety and reliability. Everything else takes a back seat to that. When people think of cartridges like the 416 Rem Mag and the 458 lot, they automatically imagine a ton of slow burning magnum powder in these cases, but this is actually far from the truth. Many dangerous game cartridges have a low case volume to bore area ratio. And this means that common burn rate, medium burn rate powders like H4895 and Varget are a better fit for many of these dangerous game cartridges. But some cartridges, like the 470 Nitro Express, do prefer a slower burning powder. And, I'll concede to that. So the burn rate is extremely important when it comes to powder selection for individual cartridges. Just because it's a big, dangerous game cartridge like a 458 lot doesn't mean that it takes slow burning magnum powders. Luckily, load data for powder selection is readily available to anyone. Use a powder that's known to give the desired velocity with safe pressures and adequate case fill. Load manuals pretty much have all of this information covered for you. If you don't know how to read or interpret a reloading manual, you probably shouldn't be loading dangerous game ammo at all. And let me interject by saying that if you are not an experienced reloader who understands every phase of the reloading process, do not reload your own dangerous game ammunition. Practice with your 6.5 Creedmoor until you completely understand everything about the reloading process. Dangerous game ammo is not a place for beginners to learn reloading. Now let's get back to the powder for a minute here. I mentioned earlier that safety and reliability are the most important attributes of dangerous game ammo. You'll likely be hunting dangerous game in extremely hot places like Africa or Australia, or in extremely cold places like Alaska or Russia. Because of this, I highly recommend that you choose a temperature stable powder for your application. I personally only use Hodgdon extreme powders in all of my dangerous game loads, and that's without exception. Loads that I develop in maybe 60-degree weather here at home will be stable when I hunt the Zambezi Valley on a 115-degree day. Temperature extremes are also why I recommend that you don't flirt with the very edge of pressure limits when reloading dangerous game ammunition. We aren't chasing extreme velocity here, so keep the pressure down. And we can't really talk about safety and reliability without discussing case fill. An overfilled or compressed load is just not a very good idea with dangerous game ammunition that you're going to take to a place like Africa or Alaska. You want a little bit of room in the case for natural brass expansion and contraction in these big, huge, heavy brass cases. And it helps to have a little bit of space in the case, just in case you get a little bit of bullet setback from heavy recoil when the round is in the magazine, or from, aggressive feeding while you're out hunting. You also don't want to underfill a case. A lot of people don't realize this. Underfilled cases can cause squib loads or a catastrophic explosion if the primer ignites across the top of the powder charge. Underfilled cases also cause erratic performance. I mean, any precision shooter could tell you that. So nothing good comes from underfilling or overfilling a case. I usually try to get anywhere from 90 to about 95, 96% case fill on my dangerous game loads. On my precision loads, I'm shooting for about 100% case fill, but on these, I want a little bit of a safety margin in that case. So, anything from 90 to 95% case fill is kind of my target with these for dangerous game loads. And I feel that this gives consistent performance and provides that margin of safety and reliability that a dangerous game load demands. So don't underestimate the value of case fill. For the exception of the 375 H&H Magnum, we won't have a huge selection of dangerous game brass to choose from. For my precision loads, or even for most of my hunting loads, I almost always buy premium brass for that. But we usually just don't have that option with dangerous game cartridges above 40 caliber. Unfortunately, we end up just using whatever we can, and we often end up with crappy Hornady or Remington brass, or reloading factory brass from factory ammunition. And this is one of the many reasons why I don't use loads with brass that have been fired more than twice on a dangerous game hunt. A dangerous game hunt could easily turn into a life or death situation, and you want your ammunition to be at its best. If your brass isn't right, it might not feed, extract, eject, or contain the controlled explosion in it. So never push the limits or the lifespan of your dangerous game brass for hunting. After 3 firings, my dangerous game brass becomes practice brass. Even if it's only fired one time, if I inspect this brass and I see any flaws or issues with it, or I'm suspicious of it, I just throw that brass away. You should always full length resize all of your dangerous game loads. These aren't precision loads where you want a really tight fitting cartridge in the chamber. You need your loads to be a little bit on the sloppy side so your ammo feeds and extracts in dirty, nasty, hot or wet conditions. Especially if you keep your ammo on an ammo belt in front of you so you could quickly access it in the heat of the moment on a dangerous game hunt. These cases are going to get very dusty and dirty. A 15-mile stalk on the Zambezi escarpment will also result in an extremely dusty and dirty rifle. And in those conditions, you don't want ammo that fits tightly in the chamber. Another extremely important step in reloading dangerous game ammunition is trimming your fired brass. We'll be crimping all the bullets in our dangerous game loads, so a uniform case length is mandatory to get a proper crimp. Most trimmers on the market won't work on the big boy loads. But I use, like most people, a Forster Classic case trimmer. Basically, there's 2 of these. There's the Forster Original case trimmer and the Forster Classic case trimmer. And you want the Forster Classic for these big, dangerous game loads. And I would say 95% of people out there who load dangerous game just use a Forster Classic to trim their brass. But, if you have one of those fancy Girard trimmers or something like that, those are also capable of doing all your dangerous game loads as well. But if you want to trim your dangerous game brass, just Spend what, $130, get a Forster Classic trimmer, and you're good to go with your dangerous game brass. And when you're loading dangerous game ammunition and doing brass preparation, always give each case a really good visual inspection before you proceed to the next step in the process. Never load dangerous game ammunition on a progressive or auto press either. You want full control of every step in the process. The bullet is the only thing that actually physically contacts the animal, and it's ultimately responsible for the animal's death. Bullet selection isn't as easy as you think it is for dangerous game. The animal and the location where it's hunted will factor into bullet choice for any particular dangerous game hunt. And of course, availability matters too, and it's something we deal with in these modern times. A PH hunting herd bulls in coastal Mozambique will absolutely hate a bullet like the TSX that might overpenetrate and do collateral damage on another buffalo. But a PH that hunts Dagaboys and really thick Jess might really like the TSX for punching through cover and penetrating deep. So location matters. Species also matter. If you're hunting elephant, you'll only use solids. If you're hunting cats, your PH is going to want you to use softer bullets that expand on thin-skinned animals. So bullets are very situational when it comes to dangerous game. But I will tell you one thing. For the exception of elephant, PHs everywhere just love the Swift A-frame. From big bears to big cats to crocodiles and big buffalo, PHs are always impressed with a properly placed Swift A-frame. And before you even begin load development for your dangerous game ammunition, the best thing you can do is to ask your PH what bullets he prefers for the type of hunt that you're doing and try to get those bullets. If you can't get those bullets, which is sometimes the case, because we all know availability isn't always so great on dangerous game bullets, but what you need to do in that circumstance is let your PH know what bullets you do have access to and take his advice from that point on which bullet you select. Most dangerous game bullets are also flat base. Well, the dangerous game bullets you want to be using on things like buffalo or elephant anyways, they're going to be a flat base bullets. And flat base bullets are often hard to get started when you're seating the bullet into the case. And sometimes this can cause a neck bulge, which isn't good at all. What I recommend is that when you're loading these dangerous game loads, always use a VLD style chamfer when you do case preparation. This helps the flat base bullets slide into the case mouth easier, and it prevents problems. And this is a very common problem that new reloaders experience when they first use flat base bullets. And lastly, don't use the roll crimp feature on your seating die if you can avoid it. Buy a Lee factory crimp die and crimp with that as a separate step. The results are much better with that Lee factory crimp die. And if you can't find the proper crimping die for your cartridge, Lee will custom make them for you for any cartridge. Remember, this isn't precision ammo or even your typical hunting ammo. This is dangerous game ammo, and you're not going to be chasing the lands or doing load development with different seating depths on this. Basically, your cartridge overall length is going to be determined on where the cantilever or the driving band is in the bullet. Because on these, it's going to take a moderately heavy crimp on these dangerous game loads, and you want to put that crimp right in the cantilever. So your cartridge overall length is just basically going to depend on where the cantilever is on the bullet because that's what you're crimping into. A good chronograph is mandatory for critical load development, in my opinion. By good chronograph, I don't mean the cheap Pro Chrono or Caldwell shooting chrono that a lot of people use. Something like a Magneto Speed or the Garmin unit will be very accurate and almost always give you reliable velocity readings, which is important during load development. Some dangerous game cartridges, like the mighty 505 Gibbs, uses really big dies. So you'll have to remove the 7/8 14 bushing from your press and use the larger threads for those dies. Also, some presses are just physically too small to reload some dangerous game cartridges. So always check first. I mean, I know even with my Mex Marksman, when I get to cartridges like this, I often find myself kind of shoehorning the bullet up into the seating die and then bringing the die up to the bullet in order to load those. So make sure your press is big enough to use some of these large cartridges. Due to the large powder volume in these dangerous game cases, you'll be using Magnum primers for ignition. Using standard large rifle primers instead of Magnum primers could lead to issues, so don't do that. Also, make sure that you're seating your primers all the way, bottomed out. And this is to prevent reliability issues. And it goes without saying, always use the right primer and always seat that thing all the way in so you have reliable ignition. And lastly, before leaving my reloading bench, I weigh every loaded round just to be sure that none of them have a faulty or funky powder charge compared to the other ones. Like I said, I want consistency because I want safety and reliability. If you got the impression from this video that I'm extra careful with my dangerous game loads, you'd be correct in that assumption. If you're the type of person who's going to ask me for load data, you're definitely too inexperienced to load your own dangerous game ammunition. Loading dangerous game ammo is not for beginners. So, why do I load my own dangerous game ammunition instead of just buying factory ammo from the store? Well, I do it for several reasons. I have ammo availability when availability is bad. I'm not restricted by bad quality or wildly inaccurate velocities. I can tailor my loads for rifles and hunts. I save a ton of money by reloading, and I trust my product more than factory loads, and that's the truth. This video is targeting experienced reloaders who want to start reloading dangerous game cartridges. And it provides some pointers on how to deal with common challenges when you load these great cartridges. And I hope that you found it helpful. Thank you for watching, and as always, good hunting.